Welcome back to another episode of the Intangible Matters series, where we speak to industry leaders who recognise the value of intangible assets and are using these assets to build and also maintain their competitive advantage, their edge in their businesses. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Anne Angel. So Anne's Chief Executive of Angel Australia, and also an experienced growth director. She's been in the ecosystem for a very, very long time and has an incredible amount of knowledge and experience, not just theoretically, but also on the battlefield. So Anne, leading into that, I would love if you could just give us some background and really where you've how you've got to this point in your career would be great. So welcome, Anne.
Thanks, Michael. My background, I sort of got pushed into technology and technology marketing and in a startup company kind of by accident. I met someone and did some work for him, and he decided that he thought I'd be good in his business. So he appointed me marketing manager of a business that I knew absolutely nothing about. So it was one of those baptism by fire thing, get out there and do it. And it was great. I really enjoyed it. So it was a long time ago, but I introduced laser pointers to the world, which is kind of one of those things that I'm famous for. So when laser pointer first came out, no one knew what they were. So I was charged with setting up the international distribution and marketing for laser pointers before people knew what they were. So it was good fun, and I traveled the world and did all sorts of cool stuff. Then I moved into Play for Capital, which was a small venture capital group in Adelaide, which was run by the government, and I did that for about 10 years. And then I moved to accelerating commercialisation, and I did that for about 10 years, where I was a facilitator for them. So my career has been really around early stage companies, startups, getting new products into new markets. The original company that I worked for went broke, and I did actually, with my business partner, we bought that technology. So in the background of all of this stuff, I've actually been taking my own product to markets, and that was a medical device. So that meant getting all the regulatory approvals. We've got 3 patents on that product now, but I'm not sure that that's a good idea, but we've got them. And we market that and export it all over the world. So it's a very niche product, but I've been doing that in the background. And as you said, Michael, I think it's really important that if you're consulting, you need to be on the battlefield as well. Nothing worse than having a consultant come in and tell you all the things you should do because they've read the book. But if they haven't lay in bed at night wondering how they're going to pay that bill, and if they haven't stood on an exhibition stand for 9 days straight talking to the same people about the same thing, I don't think they really have a lot of credibility. So I like the fact that I've actually been doing it as well as telling people what they should do.
Yeah, you have such a huge amount of knowledge. In fact, the more I get to know you, the more I discover how much knowledge you have. And I think it's great, if you can share with the people watching, some of those stories. So
I, in my early days, I must have been late 20s, and the company sent me up to Korea to market product in Korea. And I've been communicating with the people up there, but they sent me up to Korea, and I went into this meeting, and they had got the girl that ran the dress shop down the road to act as interpreter. And we were selling a very technical product. It was a laser system, and it was medical, and she had no idea. She could speak, she could say hello and goodbye. That was about it in English. And I ended up saying to the people, so can we get an interpreter? And she said, well, I am the interpreter. And that was one of those moments of, well, what am I doing here, and how is this ever going to work? And I actually rang Austrade on a whim, and they sent this interpreter around, who was absolutely fantastic. And I ended up selling a whole heap of product to this distribution network, thanks to quick thinking on my part, but also bringing in the Austrade guy who ended up being great. So it's one of those panic moments, what am I doing here, that you just have to work through. And the other thing about Korea, I was on the 10th floor, and there was a sign on the hotel room door that said, in case of fire, lower yourself out the window. and there was a coil of rope. But there was not 10 floors of rope, right? There was sort of just this coil of rope, and I lay awake all night thinking, if there's a fire, I'm not sure. No, I don't even know how to tie the rope so I could lower myself out the window. And there was no way that there was 10 floors of rope. But anyway, those are the things that happen when you travel.
So I'm going to use that analogy, Anne, because that almost sounds like something that a consultant devised. In other words, they didn't test the rope. And I think that exactly. Sort of leads into, I mean, you and I first met, you were working at Accelerating Commercialization. And, I think that's the difference between that consultant, which is that well-intended, but maybe not the best advice because it hasn't been tested, and particularly the things that didn't work, as opposed to you and the team that I first met at Accelerating Commercialization, who I think from memory nearly all had their battlefield experience.
Unless you had, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we first met. So I would, as much as you want to disclose, what were your first thoughts when you sort of heard about what we did and really the approach we took to helping clients grow their businesses?
Also, as with anyone that gets introduced by the government, you're always a bit skeptical. So you were introduced by the government. So, okay, and the government was saying, here's a good person that you should meet. Yeah. And of course, you're so smooth, Michael, so smooth. And it's sort of, oh, this has to be bullshit because this is just too smooth. So that first time that you did the presentation, I did think it was interesting. You said that you thought I was a bit skeptical. Maybe that's just the way I presented, but I actually was kind of interested. And then you came to Adelaide, and we did some stuff in Adelaide. But I had sort of a real aha moment when I heard you the second time, and then the third time, and then the fourth time, was that. And in my business, and also the businesses that I was working with, they were all pushing for, oh, we should get a patent. And you sort of think, well, really? And at what value are you going to get out of that? And is that where your real asset is? And in my business, I've got a couple of patents, but the asset is actually the clinical trial that we've done and the fact that we have regulatory approval, which very definitely sit in that intangible space. And it doesn't get valued, and it's worth a huge amount of money. So it sort of came home to me. And this week I've been doing some work for the Centre for Business Growth. And there's 3 companies, amazing companies with amazing technology that, one of them will be going from 0 to $100 million in 5 years, just amazing. And they're sitting there saying, oh, we should really be thinking about intangible assets. And I said, yes, you should be thinking about intangible assets. But at least people are saying it, which was nice, but they had been to the Big 4 to get a valuation. And I was like, well, you really need to speak to Michael, because that perspective of looking at it from a different angle, and there's nothing like the aha moment of, well, what kind of assets of Amazon and what kind of assets of Twitter and some of those big companies that have sold for billions of dollars, they haven't got any patents, and they haven't got anything, and yet they're worth a lot of money. So I just think it was a real aha moment. And since then, I've introduced you to a few different companies that I've worked for. And I also find that when I'm teaching at the Centre for Business Growth or talking to companies, I'm always paraphrasing the intangible assets. So I'm a bit of an intangible assets guru now. I always say to people, you've got to think about it, because it's not something that's on their mind. And of course, the first thing that a startup does is go and talk to a patent attorney. And that kind of worries me a lot. Having been through that process and got a couple of patents, so I sort of have grave doubts about the true value of those.
Yeah, and look, as we've discussed, patents can be incredibly valuable, but unfortunately, they're often in isolation of the other intangible assets, often not worth that much. And I think, as we've talked about, and I think, certainly the role that you play for companies like ourselves is that we try to be independent of the advice that we give. So if we say to a client, get a patent or don't get a patent, we don't benefit from that. And I know you're in a very similar position. So, what, if you could go back to Anne Angel, at that first startup that you're involved with, what would you go back and tell Anne Angel now that, you've got, 10 years of experience?
10 years of experience.
I was just coming up with a number.
Being nice, Michael. One of the guys yesterday told me that I reminded him of his mother. And I thought, really? And he said, that's a compliment. And I go, oh, yeah, I suppose I'm the same age as your mother. Just not what I was expecting. So I think I'm thinking about this. One of the things that I've learned over my years is that asking the right question actually becomes an art form. And thinking about asking the right question and learning how to ask the right question and learning the value of the right question is something that I probably have only realised in the last couple of years. And it would be something that I would go back and tell that early Anne Angel is if it doesn't make sense and you need to ask a question, ask the question and get good at asking the right questions as soon as you can. Because working with engineering teams, I'm not an engineer, I don't have an engineering background. And those important questions about, well, if we do that, what will it do and what will it mean? If we make that change, how's it going to change our manufacturing? If we make that change, what's that going to do to our cost of goods? But then other things, the questions to the patent attorney is that, well, if we do that, what are we actually going to end up protecting? And what are we going to end up with? And what value is that going to have to me? Are the questions I think that we don't ask. And also the other things that we have in our business, the other intangibles that we don't think about, bills of materials, the supplier lists, all of those sorts of things, the customer database. It would be, start collecting and putting together that information sooner rather than later and protecting it so that it's recognising the value that it had. So that would probably be what I'd be telling myself.
So to paraphrase, it's if you don't ask the right question, you'll never get the right answer.
Exactly.
And second of all, I think this sort of plays to it is, if you think good advice is expensive, wait until you pay for bad advice or no advice. And then the last bit is don't ever go and ask a barber if you need a haircut, because the answer is always yes. So try and find people to get advice from that don't benefit from that advice. Would that be a good summary?
Absolutely. Getting advice from people that don't benefit from the advice. And that's also that question is that, okay, so I'm working with you, what benefit, and asking yourself sometimes that question is what benefit is this person going to get from the advice that they give me is really critical. And we don't ask that. We don't ask that of our accountants, and we don't ask that of we certainly don't ask it of our patent attorneys or the lawyers. And we need them. I mean, they're great, and we need them, and we need to help them. We need them to help us identify the risks and the risk profile that we have. But, that's what they're there to do, is to help you point out, or help you understand the risks. And then your board should make the decision about what we do about that risk. Do we take it a step further or do we not? But you shouldn't be asking that advice from the patent. The lawyer shouldn't be telling you how to run your business.
Yeah, I think that sort of really leads into an important point is that, I know one of the roles that you've tried, you are playing for many companies as being that genuinely independent advisor where you don't have a vested interest in the outcome. You're not providing them with, accounting services or legal or patenting. And where would you go to if you were, again, that's, let's say either an early stage business, but in fairness, as we both know, a lot of quite advanced and very large businesses actually have the same frustration in that they're often not getting that independent advice. I mean, where are some of the spots that you look for that?
I think using advisors, mentors, advisory boards is something that a lot of early stage companies don't realise that they can do. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that have got battle scars that are actually really happy to help. And I don't think the early stage companies reach out to them early enough because they think, and I get this all the time. I'm sure you get it, Michael. My product is completely different. Well, bullshit. It's not completely different. I mean, it still has to go to the market. It still has to, the regulatory issues or the market penetration, those questions are all the same. So this concept of, well, no one can help me because my product is unique is not correct. And I think that there are, and of course, those people that you bring on as mentors or onto an advisory board tend to be independent. And I'm always surprised that there's a lot of them that are more than happy to actually give back. And then of course, their role is not, and a good mentor should never tell you what to do. The good mentor should just ask you questions so that you can see what you should do, and to point out, risks, and to point out, to open doors for you so you can see what's behind the door, and not to tell you what to do. So if you've got people around you who are telling you what to do, then you need to find some other mentors, because they're the wrong kind of mentors.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Coming back to intangibles for a moment, and you've obviously had a lot more exposure than most, but how would you explain why intangibles are critical to businesses trying to scale?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think businesses take those things for granted, and so as they're building their business and scaling, they don't kind of think about some of the intangibles that they have. They don't think about some of the things that they're building, and they don't protect them. And I know that you have had this experience, and I've certainly had that experience where I've said to people, so who has access to your customer list? Who has access to your bill of materials? And there's two things. It's not just who could pick that up and take it, but also who could go in and sabotage it, who could go in and actually do something that, so protecting it and identifying it. But I think you've demonstrated in a lot of the stuff that you have told me or shown me is how it can make a difference to the value of the company. So, and I talk a lot to businesses now about don't build the business so that it operates around one person. So your systems and processes become incredibly valuable, because the business should operate without the founder. And it may need to operate without the founder, and that increases the value of the business. So I'm not sure that answers your question.
No, it was actually pretty good. So leading on to that, what are some of the, what would you say are the top, one or two risks that you see most businesses taking?
In the early stage, it would be not giving everyone in the business access to all of those, the databases and the drawings and all of those things. So that would be one risk. Not developing a customer database, not actually starting to put together that customer database, because it tends to be, oh, we'll do that later, we'll do that later, we'll do that later. But that, the CRM, a good CRM, a good history of all of those customers and who they are, and your installed base. We forget about who have we sold product to, because that can end up being incredibly valuable. Because if someone, if you're trying to exit at some point in the future, and let's face it, eventually we have to exit. I mean, because we as individuals are going to exit. So what are we going to do with this business, or do you just shut it? And I think it's incredibly sad when family businesses end up just closing because they can't do anything with it. And so I think that's a really sad thing when that happens, and invariably it's because they haven't thought about, well, what is going to be valuable, and what would people, how do we structure so that we are attractive for someone to come in, and that's not being reliant on the founder, making sure all the systems and processes are in place so that the business can run, and it doesn't rely on a couple of people to be there. It's got to be a bit independent.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, at some point there will be some form of capital event. Either you're raising money, you're looking for that exit event, maybe you're heading for an IPO, or it could be even a merger and acquisition. So from your experience, what would you say is, again, some of those things that a business owner can do today that can build that value leading for whatever that event's going to be?
Thinking about what the exit is likely to be, and is that a strategic positioning? So, who do you think, how are you going to get an exit? So is it going to be, is a customer going to take you out? Is a competitor going to take you out? Is your customer database going to be attractive to someone else? is someone going to buy you because of your distribution network? And I think carefully about where the value in your business is, and then work on building that and developing that. And it may not be your technology, it might be your customer database, it might be something else. So think about your, who is going to buy you and why are they going to buy you. I think in Australia, one of the things that we do is that we're not visible enough. So we don't get out there and have the visibility so that we don't, when it comes time to exit or to move on, then we have a limited knowledge or a limited range of potential exit strategies because we haven't been out there. And I think you have to go out there and have some conversations and read, read about how other companies have actually merged or exited or what have they done and how have they done things, because our valuations here tend to be smaller than what they are if you think a bit broader. And I mean, that's what you're all about, Michael. I mean, you help people see the wood for the trees and see opportunities outside that initial thing of, we'll do 2.5 times EBITDA, and that's a good valuation. It's like, really? I mean, can't we think any bigger than that? So I think thinking strategically about what have we really got here and what are other people going to value, and it's not always the tech.
Yeah, and I think just to paraphrase, what you were saying, as we say, intangible assets in particular are always worth more in big hands than small hands, and it's finding the biggest hands possible, but also at the right time, because these big companies go through cycles of M&A and acquisition, and if you get your timing right, it's that old adage, knowledge is power. But as I like to add, timing is everything. And unfortunately, we've seen that in sometimes a good way and sometimes a not so good way.
I was just going to say, I was working with a university that shall remain nameless, and they, I think I even told you this at the time, so they had done a deal with reasonable sized company. Sorry, that's the cat. Reasonable sized company. Look.
Don't you love the modern video age?
Beautiful. Reasonable sized company. They so it was a university that had done a deal, and they got a few $1 million. But the deal was not only do they get the technology from this particular division of the university, but they get anything they think of forever. Yeah. Right? Or anything they think of forever. And it was a few $1 million, so it was nothing. But this guy that was running this division, this professor, was international leader in his field. Like, he was the man. And he met with this company in the US every month and told them all of the stuff in his head on a monthly basis. Like, that's worth millions and millions of dollars. But then what was really scary was that they sold the business to a Japanese company, and that contract went with it. Really? Really? And he was happy because, 5 years ago, he got a couple of $1 million, and he was still providing all of this knowledge. And you think, I bet that US company valued that contract at probably 30, 40, 50 million and got an uplift in their valuation because of the deal that was done with the Australian university. And that horrifies me, that no one actually thought, hang on a minute, what's in that guy's brain and the access that he has to the intellectual property or the know-how within the university, he has given away.
Yeah.
And someone else made a lot of money out of it. And that really, that kind of worries me. I think that's a good story where, some university people and people in companies go, yeah, actually, we are giving away a lot of our knowledge and IP and understanding and know-how for nothing. And
look, in our experience, well, as Drucker says, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And unfortunately, we've worked with now, close to 3,000 clients. And I think only once have I ever seen a client, and we work not just startups, obviously, right up through to, massive Fortune 500 companies. Only one company we've ever seen could even give us a relatively meaningful list of what these assets are. So coming back to that start point that you said, if you don't know what these assets are, you can't know what the risks are. You can't know what the value is. And you're absolutely right. We've actually seen accidental acquisitions of these assets because even the buyer didn't know what they're actually acquiring. So it's not even just the seller that doesn't know. Sometimes the buyer doesn't know either. Yeah. Hey, Anne, I, as you know, could talk to you for hours.
I'm sorry about the cat, but
No, I think
if I keep pushing him away, he's just going to keep trying to come back.
I know, it's hilarious, and I think it just adds to the modern age. So we know that this video wasn't recorded pre-COVID. And we could talk for a very long time, and I love talking to you because I always learn something. But just in terms of sort of a final comment to those people watching, what would you say to them that they can do, today to ultimately get that forward value or get that scale? Because that's the thing, is that valuation's great down the track, but it's what do I do today?
So this is unsolicited, but I'd say talk to you, Michael.
Oh, I was sort of hoping you might not say that, but which is wonderful, and thank you so kindly.
But I think that's true. So it might, I mean, it's you or someone like you or someone that has that, has drunk the Kool-Aid and recognizes, because you really need someone, and it comes down to someone asking the right questions. So, you sit your people around the board table, and it's having someone say, well, have you got this and have you got that? And how do you protect this and how do you protect that? And so someone like you who asks those key questions, that's when the company goes, oh shit, yeah, we're not doing anything about that, or we haven't protected that. So, and sometimes you need someone from outside to ask those questions. So, you guys do it, and your company helps a lot of people through seeing that. And if it's not you, then I would say to companies, find someone that can help you think through what are the intangibles that you're building. But it's not so much the intangibles, because we're all sort of throwing around that intangible, but it's like, what is the value? Where is the value of your business? So what is it that you're doing in your business that's valuable? And I've heard you say this, is that what is it in your business that if someone got hold of, or someone took, or you didn't have, that would make you, that would shut you down, or that would make a big difference? So you really have to give people, you have to ask the questions so that people sit down and think about it. And it's a team thing, because, it's the engineering department that says, well, we've been working on this thing in the background, and we've just, it's on the share drive and everyone's got access to it and all the drawings are there, and no one has sort of, thought, oh shit, we should be, doing something to protect that.
Yeah, no, very salient point. And I once again have to thank you for giving up your time. I know that you are so busy helping lots of companies scale, and, thank you for the very kind recommendation, people should talk to us, but it's a both-way recommendation. And as you know, there's not many clients we don't say, go and talk to Anne, go and have a coffee and just see, do these people ideally, one of my favorite sayings is always hire the people that know the things you don't, because there's no point hiring the people that know the things you do.
Yeah, what's the point in hiring people that are just like you? That's that whole unconscious bias stuff. And when we're all a lot more comfortable with the people that look like us, you got to bring in the people who don't look like you and don't think like you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've got to say, and I've sat there with you and clients, and I'm constantly amazed at some of the amazing questions you ask clients, because again, you know the things that we don't, and your experience and the success that you've had on that battlefield, and your ability to work with clients and take them on that journey, I've watched personally, and it's wonderful to have you as not just a friend, a colleague, but also part of that ecosystem.
Thank you, Michael. That's very nice.
So thank you again to you, Anne, for joining us. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this podcast. I hope you found it of interest. I cannot recommend highly enough that you get in contact with Anne. She will always have a coffee, or ideally a glass of wine. And Anne, I look forward to being
with a glass of wine and a coffee.
Absolutely. And I sincerely look forward to being back in Adelaide very soon and doing just that with you.
Yes, I've got some companies for you to meet. Perfect.
Even better. Well, everyone, I hope you found that of interest. I know I certainly learned a couple of things, as I always do, talking to Anne, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again.